Battle of Salamis. The Persian Empire had conquered half the known world, and now King Xerxes brought a fleet of over 1,000 warships to crush the last free Greek city-states. The Greeks had barely 300 triremes, wooden galleys powered by 170 rowers each. Facing annihilation, the Athenian commander Themistocles made a calculated gamble. He lured the massive Persian armada into the narrow straits of Salamis, where numbers meant nothing. When dawn broke on September 29th, the Persian fleet entered the kill zone. Their ships collided with each other in the confined waters, oars shattering, formations disintegrating. The Greek triremes struck like wolves, bronze rams tearing through enemy hulls below the waterline. Ships filled with water and capsized in minutes, dragging hundreds of armored Persian soldiers to the bottom. The water turned red. Hand-to-hand combat erupted on sinking decks as Greek hoplites boarded enemy vessels. By sunset, over 200 Persian ships were destroyed. Xerxes watched his invincible fleet shattered from a golden throne on the shore, understanding that his conquest of Europe had died in those blood-soaked straits. Salamis proved that strategy and terrain could overcome overwhelming force. Western civilization survived because 300 Greek ships refused to break. Battle of Actium. The Roman world was tearing itself apart. Octavian controlled the west, while Mark Antony and Cleopatra commanded the east with a combined fleet of 230 warships and thousands of troops. On September 2, 31 BC, off the coast of Greece, the two fleets met to decide who would rule the known world. Antony's ships were massive quinqueremes, floating fortresses built for ramming. Octavian's Admiral Agrippa commanded lighter, faster vessels designed for maneuverability. The battle began with Antony's fleet attempting to break through Octavian's lines. Fire arrows arced through the air, setting sails and rigging ablaze. Marines clashed on burning decks while ships rammed each other, timbers splintering, men screaming as they fell into the sea. Then Cleopatra made her move. Her Egyptian squadron suddenly broke formation and fled south with full sails, carrying the war chest. Antony, seeing his lover retreat, abandoned his fleet and followed in a single galley. His stunned forces collapsed, ships surrendered or were burned. By nightfall, Octavian had won the Mediterranean. Within a year, both Antony and Cleopatra were dead by their own hands. Actium ended the Roman Republic and gave birth to the empire, all decided by ships burning on blue water. Battle of Lepanto. For centuries, the Ottoman Empire had dominated the Mediterranean with an unstoppable galley fleet. On October 7, 1571, a Holy League of Christian states assembled 206 galleys to challenge Ottoman supremacy. Off the coast of Greece, they met 230 Ottoman galleys in what would become the last great clash of oared warships. Over 140,000 men packed into vessels separated by mere feet of water. When the lines collided, it became a slaughterhouse. Cannons fired at point-blank range, turning wooden decks into shrapnel storms. Ottoman janissaries and Christian soldiers fought hand-to-hand across blood-slicked planks. Galleys locked together, becoming floating arenas of butchery. The Ottomans deployed fierce Algerian corsairs who specialized in boarding actions, but the Christians had brought something new: 6 galleasses, massive gun platforms that tore through the Ottoman center. The water grew so thick with bodies that survivors later claimed you could walk across corpses from ship to ship. When the guns finally fell silent, 30,000 men were dead. The Ottoman fleet was shattered, losing 200 galleys. The Mediterranean's balance of power shifted forever. Lepanto demonstrated that even the mightiest empire could be broken in a single afternoon of coordinated violence at sea. Spanish Armada. 1588. King Philip II of Spain assembled 130 ships carrying 30,000 men for the invasion of England. The Armada was meant to be invincible, a floating army that would crush the heretic English queen. In July 1588, the Great Fleet entered the English Channel in a crescent formation 7 miles wide. The English had faster, more maneuverable ships and longer-range cannons. For a week, they harassed the Spanish formation, firing and retreating before the Spanish could close for boarding. The Armada anchored off Calais, waiting to link with invasion forces. That night, the English sent 8 fire ships blazing into the Spanish fleet. Captains cut anchor cables in panic, scattering into darkness. At Gravelines, the English finally closed in. Their cannons fired 500 rounds at point-blank range, smashing through Spanish hulls, killing men in waves. The San Mateo and San Felipe were battered into floating wrecks. But the real killer was yet to come. Damaged and demoralized, the Armada fled north around Scotland. Storms caught them. Ships smashed against Irish rocks, drowning thousands in freezing water. Of 130 ships, only 67 limped home. Spain lost 20,000 men, half the fleet, and its reputation for naval invincibility. England survived, and the age of Spanish dominance ended in those storm-tossed northern seas. Battle of Texel. The Dutch Republic was fighting for its existence against combined English and French fleets determined to strangle its trade empire. On August 21, 1673, 75 Dutch warships under Admiral de Ruyter intercepted the Allied fleet of 81 ships off Texel. What followed was 4 days of continuous naval warfare, ship against ship in rolling North Sea swells. Unlike the quick, decisive battles of previous eras, Texel became an endurance contest of seamanship and firepower. The fleets hammered each other with broadsides that turned the sea to splinters and smoke. Ships emerged from gun smoke with masts shot away, rigging hanging like spiderwebs, decks slick with blood. The French squadron, led by d'Estrées, refused to fully engage, leaving the English to face the Dutch alone. British Admiral Sprague, obsessed with personal honor, challenged his Dutch counterpart to single combat. His flagship was shot to pieces beneath him. He transferred to another vessel, which was also destroyed. Transferring a third time, his boat was hit by a cannonball, killing him instantly. By the battle's end, both fleets were exhausted, thousands dead, but the Dutch had prevented invasion. De Ruyter's tactical brilliance saved the Republic, proving that smaller fleets with superior commanders could defeat greater numbers through sustained aggression. Battle of Trafalgar. Napoleon controlled Europe, but needed to destroy the British Royal Navy to invade England. On October 21, 1805, off Cape Trafalgar, Admiral Nelson led 27 British ships against 33 Franco-Spanish vessels. Nelson's plan was revolutionary. Instead of the traditional parallel lines of battle, he would charge directly at the enemy formation in 2 columns, breaking their line and creating chaos. As HMS Victory led the charge, Franco-Spanish ships fired broadsides into its bow. 40 men died in minutes, cannonballs tearing through multiple decks, turning the ship into a killing box. Victory's cannons remained silent until it smashed through the enemy line, then unleashed a devastating broadside into the stern of the Bucentaur that killed 400 men instantly. The battle became a point-blank melee. Ships fired into each other from yards away, muzzle flashes illuminating smoke-filled carnage. Nelson, pacing Victory's quarterdeck, was shot by a French sniper. The musket ball shattered his spine. As he died below decks, his fleet systematically destroyed the Franco-Spanish formation. When the guns stopped, 18 enemy ships were captured or sunk. 4,400 Franco-Spanish sailors were dead. British losses, no ships, 458 dead. Trafalgar gave Britain absolute naval supremacy for a century, ensuring Napoleon could never cross the Channel. Battle of Navarino. The Greek War of Independence had reached a crisis. An Ottoman-Egyptian fleet of 78 warships had gathered in Navarino Bay to crush the rebellion. Britain, France, and Russia sent a combined fleet of 27 warships to observe. On October 20, 1827, the Allied fleet entered the horseshoe-shaped bay where the Ottoman fleet sat at anchor. The commanders intended only to intimidate, but tensions were catastrophic. When an Ottoman ship fired on a British boat delivering a message, the Allied fleet erupted. What followed was point-blank annihilation. The Ottomans were trapped in an enclosed bay with no room to maneuver. Allied ships positioned themselves beside enemy vessels and fired broadside after broadside at ranges so close that gun smoke blinded everyone. The wooden Ottoman ships, many ancient and poorly maintained, splintered like kindling. Fires spread from ship to ship. Trapped crews chose between burning alive or drowning. The water filled with screaming men, burning debris, and sinking hulls. In 4 hours, 60 Ottoman ships were destroyed. 6,000 Ottoman and Egyptian sailors died. Allied losses: 181 dead, 0 ships lost. Navarino was the last major battle fought entirely by wooden sailing ships, a brutal finale to an era of naval warfare that had lasted for millennia. Greek independence was secured by the most one-sided massacre in naval history. Battle of Lissa. The age of ironclad warships had arrived, but no one knew how these iron monsters would actually fight. On July 20, 1866, in the Adriatic Sea, the Austrian and Italian fleets met to answer that question. Italy had 12 ironclads, newer and more powerful. Austria had 7 ironclads and a commander, Admiral Tegethoff, who understood that ramming might work again. As the fleets closed, Italian guns fired at long range, rounds bouncing off Austrian armor. Tegethoff formed a wedge and charged directly into the Italian line at full speed. The Austrian flagship Ferdinand Max rammed the Italian Re d'Italia at 11 knots, its iron spur tearing a massive hole below the waterline. Water flooded in catastrophically. The Re d'Italia listed, capsized, and sank in minutes, taking 640 sailors to the bottom. Men trapped below decks drowned in darkness as the ship rolled. Others were crushed between the colliding vessels. The ramming transformed the battle into chaotic close-quarters combat, where Italian numerical superiority meant nothing. Ships circled each other, firing at point-blank range, iron rounds creating showers of sparks. By afternoon, the Italians retreated despite superior numbers. Lissa proved that in the age of iron, ramming still killed, and aggressive commanders could overcome technological disadvantage. Every navy in the world redesigned their ships with reinforced rams, a tactical lesson written in 640 drowned Italian sailors. Battle of Tsushima. Russia's Baltic fleet sailed 18,000 miles to reclaim naval supremacy from Japan. The voyage was hell: mechanical failures, tropical heat, dwindling supplies. By May 1905, the exhausted Russian fleet entered the Tsushima Strait. Admiral Togo's Japanese fleet was waiting with newer ships, better training, and superior fire control. On May 27th, the battle began. Japanese gunnery was devastatingly accurate, shells hitting Russian ships from ranges the Russians couldn't match. The battleship Oslabya took multiple hits below the waterline. Water poured into ruptured compartments. She listed, capsized, and vanished beneath the waves in 20 minutes, carrying over 500 men down. The Borodino suffered catastrophic magazine detonations, the entire ship disintegrating in a fireball that vaporized hundreds. Through 2 days of running battle, Japanese squadrons hunted the disintegrating Russian fleet like wolves. Ships that tried to escape were caught and sunk. Those that fought were pounded into wrecks. When it ended, 21 Russian ships were sunk, 5 captured. 5,000 Russians were dead, 6,000 captured. Japanese losses: 3 torpedo boats sunk, 117 dead. Tsushima was the first decisive battle of the modern naval era, proving that industrial precision, fire control systems, and trained crews were now more important than courage. It also announced Japan as a global naval power and shattered Russia's imperial prestige, helping trigger the 1905 revolution. Battle of Jutland, May 31, 1916. The British Grand Fleet and German High Seas Fleet finally met in the North Sea. 250 warships carrying 100,000 men prepared for the decisive naval battle of World War I. The British had 28 dreadnoughts, the Germans 16, along with dozens of battlecruisers and destroyers on each side. When the battlecruiser squadrons clashed first, the violence was apocalyptic. HMS Indefatigable was hit by German shells that penetrated her magazine. The explosion tore the ship in half, both sections sinking in 30 seconds. 1,017 men died instantly, only 2 survived. Minutes later, HMS Queen Mary suffered the same fate. A massive detonation broke her back, the ship disappearing in a fireball. 1,266 men died. When the main fleets joined battle, the sea erupted in synchronized thunder. Dreadnoughts fired broadsides and salvos, shells the size of automobiles arcing through smoke and spray. The German battlecruiser Lützow took 24 direct hits but kept fighting. HMS Warspite's steering jammed, sending her in circles directly toward the German line under concentrated fire. The battle raged into night, destroyers and cruisers clashing in darkness, torpedoes slicing through black water. By dawn, 25 ships were sunk, 8,500 men dead. The Germans sank more ships, but they retreated and never challenged British control again. Jutland confirmed that modern naval warfare was industrial-scale slaughter, where entire crews could vanish in seconds. Battle of Narvik. German destroyers had seized the Norwegian port of Narvik in April 1940, but they were trapped. 10 destroyers sat in the narrow fjord, low on fuel and ammunition, surrounded by mountains. On April 10th, 5 British destroyers charged into the fjord in a dawn attack. The Germans were caught at anchor. The British destroyer Hardy fired torpedoes at point-blank range, sinking 2 German destroyers before they could react. But the fjord became a trap for everyone. German shore batteries and remaining destroyers fired back from multiple directions. Hardy was crippled, run aground, 150 men killed. The British withdrew, but 3 days later they returned with the battleship Warspite and 9 destroyers. The Second Battle of Narvik was systematic annihilation. The Warspite's 15-inch guns fired into the fjord, shells landing like thunderbolts among the trapped German vessels. Destroyers hunted in the narrow waters, trading torpedoes at suicidal ranges. The German destroyer Erich Kellner tried to escape up a side fjord. British destroyers cornered it, firing until it was a burning wreck. Every German destroyer was sunk or scuttled. 800 Germans died. The battles proved that confined waters magnified naval combat's brutality. There was no room for maneuver, no escape, just killing at close range until one side was annihilated. Battle of the North Cape, December 26, 1943. The Arctic winter, the German battleship Scharnhorst hunted a British convoy in total darkness. The British home fleet, led by HMS Duke of York, was hunting Scharnhorst. At 4:30 p.m., in pitch blackness broken only by snow squalls, radar detected the German battleship. The Duke of York's guns fired star shells that illuminated Scharnhorst like a stage, then fired everything. 14-inch shells smashed into the German battleship, starting fires, destroying gun turrets. Scharnhorst tried to flee at 32 knots, but more shells hit her engine rooms. Speed dropped. British destroyers closed in, firing torpedoes through the darkness. One torpedo struck, then another, then three more in rapid succession. Scharnhorst was dying, but her crew kept fighting, firing at muzzle flashes in the black Arctic night. The British ships circled the crippled battleship, firing broadsides into her at point-blank range. By 7:00 p.m., Scharnhorst was a burning wreck, listing heavily. Admiral Fraser ordered ceasefire. The destroyers moved in to finish her with torpedoes. Scharnhorst capsized and sank in the freezing Arctic water. Of 2,000 crew, only 36 survived. The rest died in water so cold that survival time was measured in minutes. The Battle of the North Cape was fought in darkness by radar and searchlight, a brutal demonstration that modern warfare had made night and distance irrelevant. The sea remained the same killer it had always been.